Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.
I'm so pleased to have on Nashville-based guitarist, an incredible talent, Tobin Dale. Thanks for coming on the show, Tobin.
Thanks for having me, Eric. I appreciate it.
So the band you're with, and you're with a couple bands, but the Sweet
busy.
Things, you always stay busy. The Sweet Things just came out with their new album, Brown Leather, and I'd been checking out the videos and everything. You guys are doing some cool music with them.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, the whole concept of brown leather is the punk rockers go country. You're changing out of your black leather jacket into your brown leather. Our friend Jesse Mellon kind of called that the transition, the brown leather transition. So that's the concept of this new album, and I'm just really excited about it.
Well, I found it interesting too, because you're the Nashville cat, mixed in with mainly these New York guys, and you did this album between 3 different studios.
Yeah, they started recording before I joined the band, and they did some tracks at Fame Studios in Alabama, and just found that their guitar player wasn't making that transition to the more country and blues influenced music as easily. So they brought me in, and right before the world shut down, we got to go up to New York and cut some of these live basic tracks, the rhythm tracks in the same room, which was really helpful for keeping a consistent energy. And then the world shut down, and I did my overdubs from here in Nashville. So yeah, kind of a national trotting record to get this whole ordeal done. Well,
I think what's fun about it too, and you and I have known each other here in Nashville for a long time because we do kind of like guitars. And
you could say that.
I always like to see what guitar or amp and effects you're taking out. But with the album, with Brown Leather, I thought what was so unique about it, Tobin, is that I expected it to have the Stones influences and the Black Crowes, but what surprised me was hearing some of the country kind of Graham Parsons influences in there.
Yeah, that's in there for sure. I mean, I'm from Florida, which is where Graham was from, so it's hard to ignore those influences. And of course, my parents and grandparents listen to country music, so even though I play rock and roll, I think part of my blood is country music. And of course, living in Nashville, you can't get away from it. So it's in there. I don't think it's the predominant influence, but it's certainly a part of the stew that we have that makes up our musical taste.
Well, and it's so much fun too, because correct me if I'm wrong, but like on one of the music videos, didn't you have like T.G. Sheppard like open that?
Yeah, my father-in-law T.G. Sheppard was kind enough to loan his voice in a kind of Dukes of Hazzard homage. We couldn't get Waylon, of course, so T.G. was a really good substitute for that.
Well, and the videos are so much fun that you guys are doing with these, and I know that you and I were talking before we got in studio to where talking about the whole roller derby angle.
Right, yeah.
And it's like how you guys came up with the people to be in the video.
Our singer Dave is dating a girl who plays on a roller derby team in New York, and that's big business in the Northeast. The roller derby is a very serious thing, so I learned a lot about it making that video, but I definitely learned not to cross any of those girls, man. I wouldn't want to make any of them angry.
I'm telling you, it reminds me of the old days, when roller derby was on the TV all the time.
Yeah,
and it's like, and those gals were scrappy and mean.
They were, but they also had really great coordination and really cool moves, so it gives the whole thing a fun kind of 70s vibe, but also a little bit of danger. There's a little bit of punk rock in there, so it works to our whole concept of the country 70s kind of influence along with the rock and roll influence.
I'll tell you what, the album sounds so good, and obviously I always enjoy your guitar playing, particularly the instrumental.
Thank you. That one was an older track I had done in California when I lived out there, and the guys liked it so much they wanted to bookend the record with it, and it sort of became the last few notes that you hear is that instrumental on an old National I've got. That's an old 30s National Style O. And yeah, it was really cool for us to
I was going to ask you, because I could hear the metal tone as you were
yes,
playing. I'm going, what guitar is Tobin using on that?
It sounds like a rusted trash can, but it just takes you right to the Delta. It's a very specific sound.
So beside the Sweet Things, you stay busy here in Nashville, since you moved here from Florida years ago, and you also play with a local band called the Untamed.
I do, yeah, the Untamed. They're a great local band, again, a kind of 60s and 70s influenced rock and roll band with a great female singer named Callie.
Well, I was joking you too, because it's like then you're like the opening band, you're the headline band, and then are you the cleanup band? I mean,
yeah, I just change hats. I have a series of hats that I'll change out of.
And you were saying you're also going to be changing out guitars and rigs, right?
Oh, you have to. I mean, that's the perfect excuse to flaunt all that stuff, so why not?
Well, I got to ask you this, Tobin. As a fellow guitar player, certainly not to your level, but how many guitars are you going to be taking out on the road for these tour with the bands?
Well, since we're driving to a lot of these, I'll get to bring a few more than if I were flying. But generally, I can get it done with 3. I play in a lot of open tuning, so I need a G tuning and an E tuning and then a standard tuning. So I can get it done with 3.
Wow.
Yeah. If we really got, if we're doing a local show, I might bring 4 or 5 just to stretch it out.
Possibly a few vintage pieces in there also.
Almost exclusively.
I know your taste.
Yeah, it's hard to get away. Once you've played the real thing, it's hard to go back.
It really is.
Yeah.
I think that's the problem. Is like for you and I think so many Nashville musicians, it's like once you play the vintage stuff, it's like going, okay, well, the reissues and everything are great, but man, if you can get your hand, if you can afford the vintage stuff that's not, you know, too much refinished or anything else.
I was lucky enough to catch on to that when I was pretty young and find deals when they were still able to be found. I mean, there's still great deals out there as well, but yeah, I've been priced out of a lot of the stuff I love, but fortunately I started young enough to get my hands on some cool stuff.
Thank goodness, yeah. And I'll tell you what, man, you do a great job. Now, I got to ask you this too. Besides playing with the two bands, which would seem to keep you pretty busy, particularly touring this year, are you still doing session work for other people too? You doing some
I try to. I have a pretty specific thing that I do. You know, we're in Nashville, so there's a million wonderful guitar players, and I love learning from all of them. But yeah, if somebody needs some kind of swampy slide guitar stuff, I'm always down to throw that onto an album if I can.
That's got to be fun.
It is, man. It's a cool challenge to play on stuff that you wouldn't normally play on. It's, you know, a lot of people want to bring some of that DNA into what they're doing, but it wouldn't necessarily be a song I would write. So it's been a learning experience for sure.
With your songwriting, and obviously such a huge business here in Nashville, what do you find yourself writing towards and collaborating with, you know, with your songs too that you're doing?
I've been really inspired by the music of Memphis. You know, my father-in-law T.G. is from there, and so there's been a really common thread of the Memphis influence, you know, soul and some of that early Stax and Volt Records music. So a lot of the stuff I try to write, I'm in my head, I'm trying to be Steve Cropper or some version of that. So I always, you know, he writes such really beautiful guitar parts, but they're so simple, and you remember all of those songs, and he's got a million of them. So that's, I would say, for songwriting, he's probably my biggest influence.
Well, you know, and Cropper is such a good example because with Steve, you know, those licks get in your head.
Yeah.
And then you never, I mean, that's what hooks you into those great songs that Cropper was a part of.
And they're all similar enough to where you know it's him, but they're all totally different songs. They're never the same, but they're always kind of coming from the same place.
Well, and when you hear Steve talk about it, it's like going, yeah, I just played this lick backwards. I'm like going, what? That's how you came up with Knock on Wood? It's like, okay, well, you're Steve Cropper.
It's working for him, I'm telling you. He's got some hits.
Well, you know, and I think, you know, with your playing and songwriting too, it seems like there's definitely been an evolution since you and I first met back in the day, and how you're progressing with the bands and your playing and everything. It seems like you've really found your groove lately.
I hope so. I appreciate you saying that. You know, I've worked with a lot of really talented producers. Matt Chiaravalle did the Sweet Things record, and Chris at Welcome to the 1979s working with the Untamed. And so I've had to think about songwriting and song structure in a much more macro view with what helps the band. And so you really start to kind of feel how your parts fit into a whole ensemble. And of course, playing with horns and harmonica players and keyboard players, you really learn to play guitar in a much more sparse and specific way, so it's been helpful.
Well, you know, and I think, and as you and I both know, it's like, you know, particularly here in Nashville, and I'm sure in LA and Muscle Shoals too, but it's like, it just elevates your game. You know, when you're around musicians of such a higher level,
Absolutely.
you know, you can't be the same artist you were when you came here.
That's true, and I think with the last 2 years being what it is, especially, everybody's kind of been fighting over scraps. You know, there's been very little in the way of touring, and you know, it's been very difficult. So I think it's, I hate to use the term weeded out, but I think the people that are still doing this are the ones that are really devoted and really want to learn and grow, and it's been good. I think it's been helpful in terms of making sure you're fully devoted to this whole thing. The lifers are still around doing it.
Right. Thank goodness.
Absolutely.
And also, as you and I were talking before we got in studio, now that people are finally getting back on the road and touring, and everybody's dying for live music. I got to hand it to you also. The clothes, the boots, everything looked great, and I know that your wife, you know, Peyton, kind of helps with that.
You could say that. Yeah, absolutely. She's very gifted as a stylist, and she's really good at telling me when it's too much. So I appreciate that. And yeah, she's got access to a lot of great stuff, so I'm fortunate to have
probably
that.
giving the whole band, you know, both bands advice also when you guys are doing the videos and the photo shoots, because, you know, it's so important.
It is, yeah, and she's very detail oriented, so she thinks about stuff that I wouldn't necessarily, so it's been very helpful to make sure it's cohesive and that it's we're putting our best foot forward in everything we do to represent our band, so it's from the feet up.
You and I are more concerned about coordinating the guitar with the amplifier and pedals.
That's it, yeah, I've got enough on my mind sonically. Visually, we'll need some help.
Yeah, exactly, we're guys, we need help.
That's true, yeah,
you know?
It is, yeah, and then again, you don't want one guy looking, you know, like he's from the 70s and another guy in his, you know, his regular t-shirt. You kind of want everybody to look like they play in the same band.
Yeah, definitely. You can't mix in like the 80s boy band look either, because I mean that throws the whole thing off.
You know, everybody's got their style, but I think once you pick it, you got to be fully in it. So we I think do a good job of being authentic about it.
That's fun. Well, I got to bring this up too. Obviously, with the two bands, with the Sweet Things and the Untamed, you've got websites. You got the brand new album out with the Sweet Things. I want to make sure that our viewers know where to go for the videos, for the tours this year. You know, I'm hoping with the Sweet Things, you guys are going to put that on vinyl. Absolutely,
yeah. Spaghetti Town Records is kind enough to put that out on a full-length, full 12-inch vinyl, so that's coming. Yeah, SpaghettiTownRecords.com. You can order that now. And the other videos are Video Raheem in Atlanta, a really talented director we were lucky to work work with. His YouTube channel will have all our videos. So we've got the roller derby video for Brown Leather. We got another fun one called I Don't Mind, where we were kind of hiking through the backwoods of Georgia in our snakeskin boots. So really fun afternoon.
Doesn't everyone do that?
You know, I wish I had known that was where we were going. I would have probably changed my footwear for that one, but
that did kind of feel like a Graham Parsons moment.
You know, he's a big influence, especially taking country music into the kind of rock and roll territory like he did. And there's such a vulnerability in his music that you can't help but feel everything he sang. So I've always tried to learn from that, you know. Well,
it left such a great mark on music and everything else. I want to make sure our viewers also know, for Tobin Dale, where do they need to go for your website, for your social media, everything you got going on, and to check out the cool clothes and guitars you're going to have?
Well, my personal one's at Tobin Dale, which is me, and that'll have, you know, I post every time we're playing anywhere. And then the Sweet Things are at the Sweet Things Tonk. As in honky tonk.
Nice.
And yeah, it'll have links to the Spaghetti Town site to order the album and all the videos. And you know, we got some tour dates. We're going to do a record release run starting in New York and running down to Atlanta, where Spaghetti Town's based out of.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And what about the Untamed?
The Untamed, we're going into the studio at 1979 here in Nashville to record our new EP. But of course, at the Untamed is our Instagram, so you can see what we're doing there.
You're going to be a busy guy this year.
I hope so. We've had a couple of years of not being so busy, so I'll take it. I prefer it to the alternative.
Totally. That's awesome. Well, the Sweet Things album is out now, Brown Leather. You want to check it out, be sure and go to the websites and follow Tobin also for the new videos. It's going to be great shows. He'll be playing in all the bands on the stage, so you want to see it. Tobin Dale, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate you having me.
Sponsored by the Big 98, Nashville's #1 for new country and the home of the Bobby Bones Show.